Hello my friends, well I found a fun little video for us to watch by a channel named Robert Sepehr, where he claims that Druids used wands made of holly, thus connecting Hollywood to the Druids, and then claims Druids were taught by the Phoenicians, and that somehow this connects to MKUltra mind control through the music of the 60s? I don't know either. You might want to wrap another layer of tinfoil on your hat for this one. A big shout out to my patrons who make these videos possible. Thank you. And now, on with the nonsense. I hope you enjoy.
Babylon was the ancient pagan empire prominent in biblical prophetic works as an enemy of God's people due to their occult practices, sexual depravity, ritual sacrifice, and other sin.
Babylon, from your Bible, was a city located in modern-day Iraq, about 50 miles south of modern-day Baghdad. As for their ancient culture outside of your Bible, we have some archaeological findings and writings, such as the Code of Hammurabi, but we don't know if Babylon was a den of sexual depravity or ritual sacrifice. As for their occult practices, the word occult dates back to the early 16th century, and whatever pre-Christian religions they practice has nothing to do with modern occultism. So calling their pre-Christian culture and religion occult makes no sense.
Hollywood is no different, functioning as the propaganda arm of the globalist media establishment.
That's a great assumption. I think Hollywood does contribute to society and storytelling, but I believe that culture also influences Hollywood. This idea that there is a secret cabal of magicians running the world is absurd and there's no evidence for it. Culture drives culture, and culture changes over time. This is a simple fact. This is why we no longer live in mud huts near riverbanks or tell stories of Gilgamesh by a roaring fire.
Intent on socially engineering society into its alchemical opposite.
Its alchemical opposite? What the hell would that be? And philosophical alchemy, or esoteric alchemy, speaks of changing forms into another form, discarding of the negative influences in one's life and transforming it into something better. For example, quitting smoking because smoking is bad for your health. The alchemist could see that as a process of changing from one to another. Solvent, coagula. It's not about transforming something into its polar opposite. That is absurd.
Unleashing the destructive forces of cultural Marxism.
That's your assumption. Could it be that culture is driving Hollywood? I keep hearing this term cultural Marxism used and thrown around carelessly. Same with the word Nazi. Seems like people use these words as pejoratives without having any real evidence of the accused of being a Nazi or a Marxist. But these groups are so blinded by their ignorance that they fail to see they are becoming that which they detest. Projection is a hell of a blinder.
Hollywood is a kind of city-state of its own, with its own religion.
You're speaking about Hollywood as if it's one amorphous being. It's comprised of many separate individuals with their own social, religious, and political ideologies. Sure, the majority of those in Hollywood might lean more towards the left, but I think that is because so many in Hollywood come from California, and many California cities are left-leaning. And no, Hollywood does not follow a single religion.
Including all of the trappings of neophytes, acolytes, servants, agents, star saints, hierophants, and holy sites. That said, the movie industry, along with the mainstream news and what passes for academia these days, have been weaponized and used as social engineering tools to further a political agenda.
You're giving Hollywood way too much credit. It has likely been spread by one-sided political and social ideologies that have grown organically, and individuals with those ideologies being placed in positions of authority. And I agree that political and religious ideologies should not be pushed in academia. Nowadays, so many people believe the political is in everything that I'm sure they feel justified in pushing their ideas into academia.
One of the biggest tools in the hands of the masters who run this world is Hollywood. Hollywood is an incredible story. I've said this, and maybe many hearing me now have heard me say this, but I'll say it again. that the white man's establishment comes from Europe. And in northern, southern, well, all four, northeast, south, and western Europe, even at the time of the Roman Empire and before, that whole section of Europe that we call the center for the white man's presence on the earth was quite literally ruled over, ancient Europe was ruled over by a priesthood called the Druids.
That is incredibly simplistic. The group that scholars today identify as the Druids probably were not a centralized group, and I'm not sure what time period you are speaking of, and how far north, south, east, and west are you including? Detailed accounts of the Druids date back to about the 3rd century before the Common Era, and they were essentially wiped out in the 2nd century of the Common Era. So, theoretically, they existed as the Druids for roughly 500 years.
And the Druids were they were the ministers, the priests, the judges, the lawyers, they were the religious leaders, so there was a priesthood that dominated Europe. It still does.
I am Princess Vespa, daughter of Roland, king of the Druids.
Oh, that's all we needed. A Druish princess. Funny. She doesn't look Druish.
No, it doesn't. As I mentioned earlier, the Druids were essentially wiped out by the 2nd century, and a new religion would soon spread throughout the Roman Empire. In 313, Emperor Constantine would issue the Edict of Milan, which accepted Christianity. 10 years later, it had become the official religion of the Roman Empire.
Europe is still a Druidic country. And America is a Druidic country. Unless you understand the Druidic system, then you're never going to figure out what's going on in America and England.
Europe and America are Druidic countries? What the hell does that even mean? We have no records of the Druidic system. What the hell are you talking about? If you are talking about the social classes of ancient Celtic peoples, their class system most likely was influenced by East Asian cultures.
But one of the most important symbols in the Druid system was a magic wand, like Merlin, the magician with the magic wand.
Rods or staves have been associated with rulership and power, predating the Druids by thousands of years.
And also the orchestra leaders and conductors always have a magic wand. And you have better played to the tune of the master. He directs you to play, and he directs you to stop with the magic wand.
Okay, now you are just making shit up.
So you're dancing to his music, okay? Magic wands were always made out of the wood of a holly tree. It's made out of holly wood.
I have no idea where you are getting this from. Holly would make a horrible wood for a wand. It's too flimsy and it tends to twist a lot. And there are no records I'm aware of citing the Druids used wands, let alone of what type of wood they would have used. Magic wands are noted in the Key of Solomon of being made from hazel or a nut tree, not holly.
And Hollywood is a Druidic establishment.
Could you be any vaguer? What the hell does that mean?
And the symbols, the words, the terms, the stories are designed. Think about it. Think about how Hollywood does what they do.
The words, the symbols, and stories? The words tend to come from the English language. The symbols are symbols commonly known in Western cultures, and these stories tend to be from mythology or known cultures. They make money selling people entertainment.
I'm not saying they're evil, I'm just explaining how Hollywood works. So that people go out from the movie and think in their minds, this is the way you normally would react to a situation, the way that the guy in the movie did.
No, actually the way most people in movies react to certain situations is not at all how I would react. I would never go down those stairs, I would never go in alone, and I would definitely not be as heroic. But again, we know it is fantasy, we know it is made up, and we know it is
not real.
And so that's why today, in the Western civilization, especially in the West, our ability to work with each other and live together as humans is so screwed up. Because we've been watching so much television and so many movies and so much silliness coming out of Hollywood.
You mean like how some people in certain religions are not accepting of other religious beliefs and constantly misrepresent them and at times make outright lies about them? Yeah, I don't think that is Hollywood's fault.
A druid was a priest, magician, or soothsayer in the ancient Celtic religion. They seem to have frequented forests and acted as priests, teachers, and judges. The earliest known records of the Druids come from the 3rd century BC. Relatively early German histories also assume that Druids were to be found among them.
Wow, so far I am impressed. This is historically correct.
The Druids of antiquity are steeped in legend and folklore, having no known written record of where they originally came from.
We don't have any first-hand accounts from them. All our stories are from second- and third-hand accounts.
They are widely accepted to be of Celtic origin, with many theories claiming a common ancestry with ancient Eastern cultures, and before that even possibly originating in Atlantis.
You were doing great up till this point. Atlantis and all the New Age woo-woo that goes along with it is nonsense. The Druids did not come from Atlantis, nor was Atlantis some mecca of technology or spiritual power.
In ancient times, Druids were known as wise elders who would congregate around oak trees. In fact, the word Druid in Celtic translates to knowing the oak tree. The religion of the Druids owes much to the ancient Phoenicians, and the ancient Phoenicians, which means red, like the color associated with communism, and part of the name Rothschild is closely linked with the ancient Canaanites and Hebrew.
I don't know if Druids were hanging out under oak trees. They supposedly gathered in sacred groves and woods, and what records link the Druids to the Phoenicians? And no, Phoenician does not mean the color red like communism. But I'm really getting a kick out of you forcing Marxism and communism with Druids in Hollywood. And the surname Rothschilds dates back to around the 13th century and has German and Jewish roots. Don't tell me. Let me guess. You are going to shoehorn in conspiracies around the Rothschilds into your Druid Marxist Hollywood cabal.
The ancient Phoenician Canaanite system, when it finally bled into Europe thousands of years ago, it formed what we call the Celtic Druidic system. The Celtic Druidic system had its origins in the old Phoenician Canaanite system. That whole area we call today Israel and Lebanon, that was called Phoenicia Cana.
There are no records of Phoenicians and the Druids having any system. Where are you getting all of this nonsense from? And the Canaanites, who are a collection of various tribes, predates the Druids by about 4,000 years. The Phoenicians seem to drop off in history right around the time of the Druids. So if there was any exchange, it would have had to have happened in about the 3rd century BCE. If there was any significant contact, we would have much more linguistic commonality between Phoenician and the Celtic languages.
And consequently, that whole system of the Canaanite religion found its way into Eastern Europe and then into Northern Europe and formed the basis theologically for what came to be known as the Celtic Druidic system.
Bullshit. We have little evidence of what the Phoenician system was, and even less evidence of what the Druidic system was. So, unless you can present your thesis with some actual examples, I'm filing this away as pure BS.
Magic wands were always made out of holly wood.
No, they were not.
Okay, and they're still working their magic on us in Hollywood.
By your choice. If you don't like Hollywood, don't enjoy their entertainment. You know you can change the channel, right? Nobody is forcing you to buy a movie ticket or subscribe to a streaming service. Just surround yourself with a Christian echo chamber and stuff your fingers in your ears and chant la 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 la. But stop forcing everyone into your one world religion that you so desperately want installed.
The system that we are under is a most manipulating, exploiting system that's ever been put together.
The Judeo-Christian system? Wow, I did not expect you to be so upfront and honest.
They know exactly how to manipulate your thinking. They have something called programmed music. And you go in and most people never think when they go to a movie or watch a television show. They never think about it.
Music and movies are designed to play into our emotions. Just because a tune seems fantastical, dramatic, uplifting, or sad does not mean it controls us. Good actors, a well-written script, and a spot-on movie score can cause members of an audience to cry, become joyful, involved, or swept away. But when we leave the theater, we know it was all fake. I edited this part out, but he assumes Lookout Mountain Air Force Station, which was used by our military to produce training films, was allegedly and somehow involved with MK-Ultra, which was a failed attempt at mind control using drugs. Because Lookout Mountain Air Force Base resided in Laurel Canyon in Hollywood, which became a nexus for 60s counterculture, and many musicians came out of this area in the 60s, that somehow our military is using mind control through music. I mean, he doesn't say it, but it is heavily implied, and this theory has more holes in it than Swiss cheese.
Now, the Beach Boys, got very famous back in the day during the whole hippie movement, but also Charlie Manson was very popular too. Now, Charlie Manson was a songwriter, so he would actually write songs for the Beach Boys. Now, if you don't believe me, here's an actual song that he wrote, and this is, in fact, him singing it.
I believe you. Yes, the Beach Boys knew Charlie Manson. At the time, I don't think they knew he was a crazy, drugged-out cult leader that wanted to start a race war by killing a famous actress. They probably thought he was a drugged-out, crazy songwriter.
So, that right there is, Charlie Manson. So he was very popular with the Beach Boys and with the other groups. And, of course, we all know what happened to Charlie Manson.
Yeah. He died in prison, serving out a life sentence.
So, it's very, very strange, guys. And what I'm trying to say is this could possibly be...
Drum roll, please.
An MK-Ultra type of experiment.
It possibly could be. Or maybe aliens are playing us as characters and we are actually in a giant video game. Or... maybe outside forces in another dimension are manipulating reality and causing evil to occur in the world. But so far, your evidence is contrived, shoddy, and forced together with bad hypotheses.
On society back in the day, this was a way to control the youth. They weren't really sure what was going to happen with the youth during the Vietnam War when it was all going to happen. They were probably afraid of retaliation, maybe people getting violent actually, so they needed some kind of opposition control.
You do understand that the hippie movement was counter to the popular culture at the time, right? That out of this culture movement, civil rights were improved. Our industrial war machine was heavily scrutinized, and the spread of peace and love became a motto. It gave power back to the people. Was it perfect? Of course not. But it was an organic movement that arose from the ashes of two horrific and devastating world wars. This is why I said this early on in the video clip. Culture drives culture, and culture changes over time. It's not being manipulated by some cabal of ancient Druid Phoenicians waving wands made from holly branches, or our military using music as a form of mind control. You fear reality, and so you want to claim you understand it. Well, our ever-evolving culture can be unpredictable and fearful, and that terrifies you.
And maybe these musicians were a part of that. So Laurel Canyon, if you haven't heard about it, go ahead and look it up.
The Laurel Canyon compound was recently purchased by actor and filmmaker Jared Leto for $5 million. The Army Air Corps officially built this top-secret movie production studio in 1947. Military training films and top-secret Department of Defense documentaries were produced, including a series on above-ground nuclear tests in Nevada.
Yep, and nothing about the military's failed MK-Ultra experiments.
That said, celebrities like Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley are also said to have worked there, signing non-disclosure agreements.
Really? And what is your source for this? And if true, so what? It was a military base for the production of military training films. It would not be surprising if they consulted or wanted to hire famous actors or actresses. You are really grasping at straws.
Oh, and Timothy Leary lived across the street.
Oh my God. And they probably shared the same postal worker. The horror.
For decades, a so-called anti-propaganda law prevented the U.S. government's covert broadcasting arm from delivering politically deceptive programming to American audiences. But in 2013, that came silently to an end with the implementation of a new reform passed under the Obama administration as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, which included an amendment that nullified the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, which explicitly forbids information and psychological operations aimed at influencing U.S. public opinion.
Well, that is disturbing, but it has nothing to do with the Druids, Hollywood, the Phoenicians, or 60s counterculture music.
Critics claim that the act also unleashed thousands of hours per week of government-funded radio and TV programs for domestic U.S. consumption in what has been criticized as a green light for politically motivated social engineering and U.S. domestic propaganda efforts.
Let me fill in the gaps you are leaving while reading between the lines here. The Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQ+ movement appear to have grown organically through community groups. These could be seen as extensions of the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. Now, if you want to tell your audience that somehow our government is behind these movements, then you have quite a bit of convincing evidence to produce. I'm not saying it's not plausible. It's just I'm going to need more than just your opinion. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence.
This is why we see the same exact word-for-word news stories broadcast on every media news outlet.
Or they are lazy and use the same soundbite without rewording it.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about trouble and trending irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 I know this is supposed to be very convincing that there is one script that all media reads from, but some sentences will be repeated verbatim by all news agencies, and clipping them together can make it appear that they are all reading from the same script. Indeed, I think our media is failing us, but to turn around and place faulty assumptions as to why is just as destructive. With the amount of information overload we have at our fingertips, we need to analyze it, not just cherry pick what we agree with and discard what we do not agree with. If it sounds weird, look into it. It might not be true. It might be half true, or it may be completely contrived. Sadly, we don't have time to take a deep dive into everything and find the actual truth through unbiased sources. Remain skeptical, my friends, and open to new information. Until next time, I will see you in hell, you heathens.